Today we're going to go over the practice SAT questions from yesterday, beginning with number 1. The key idea here was, on which interval is the target heart rate strictly increasing, then strictly decreasing? And if we trace some of the options, we'll see here between 0 and 30, we go increasing, and then we flatline. And at the end there, by 30, we have never went down, and we're not strictly increasing because of this flat line. That's why A is wrong. For C, between 50 and 65, we go down and then up, so it's backwards. It's the wrong order. And for D, between 70 and 90, we flat, up, flat. Those flat lines are the problem. That's why B was the best choice. And what does that look like? Between 40 and 60, it goes straight up and then straight down. For number 2, the key idea is this comma after x equals 6. That comma separates this into two problems. So the beginning, y is equal to kx, we substitute. Y is 24, so we plug in a 24 for that. And x is 6, so we plug in a 6 there. And multiplication can happen in any order, so if we wanted to, we can change around. So k6 is the same thing as 6k. And we're going to divide both sides by 6 to get 4 is equal to k. Then we start our second problem, y is equal to kx once again. And we use x equals 5 and 4 equals k. So when we substitute, it becomes 4 times 5. And we get 20. For number 3, in these geometry problems on the SAT, one of the most common things we look at is called vertical angles. For example, if angle 1 here is 35 degrees, then the angle directly across from it is also 35 degrees. That doesn't help you too much with this problem, but that will show up on others. The other thing we see is this concept of when there's multiple parallel lines, there are opposite corresponding interior and exterior angles. And that means that these are both also 35 degrees because they match up in the same positions. And the same can be said over here and over there. All of those are 35 degrees. Common thing that shows up from geometry. And lastly, I'm going to clear all this. If this angle is 35 degrees and this is a straight line, we can figure out angle 2 by taking 180 minus 35. And that tells us this missing angle. And that's exactly how you solve this one and how you get 145 degrees. Of course, just looking at it, you could see that angle 2 appears to be greater than 90 degrees, which D is the only choice. Not always are the diagrams to scale, but they're not that far off. Number 4. 16 plus 4x is 10 more than 14. Well, that turns out to be 24. And again, a comma separates this problem into two. So the first thing we do is subtract 16 from both sides, and we get 4x is equal to 8. When we divide by 4, we get x is equal to 2. And some people wanted to stop there and choose A, but that would be wrong, because we want to know the value of 8x. So what we do is we plug in this 2 for x, and it becomes 8 times 2, otherwise known as 16. Number 5, we're looking for a negative association between D and T, which means as D increases, T should go down. So the problem here is that as D increases, T is actually going up. That's why C is wrong. There is a positive relationship here. And we see for B, though it's slight, there is a slight positive trend to this graph. That's why that one is also wrong. And the second word here is association. This means how closely this scatter plot resembles a line. And between choice A and choice D, which one more closely represents a line, or looks like a line? And D would be the best answer. Number 6, converting units. If we start with 2 decagrams in one container, we want to cancel out decagrams, so we'll put it on the bottom of this fraction. In our conversion that we use, it's equal to 10 grams. Then we want to cancel out grams, so we're going to put 1 gram here on the bottom. And we use our second conversion and put 1,000 mg. So if we're tracking our units, grams cancel out, decagrams cancel out, and across the top I have 2 times 10 times 1,000, which means I add 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, giving me 20,000. The next problem is about matching numbers and letters. You don't have to actually do a lot of math here. We're just identifying that 9 cents should go with D for downloads, and 2/10 of a cent should go with S for streams. So A and B are wrong because they have 0.09 associated with the wrong letter. Between C and D, it should be plus, not minus, because we are earning money for both. So we are adding those revenue streams. For number 2, a quality control manager is selecting 7 out of 400, and then we want to know how many out of 20,000. There's a lot of different strategies. You could take 7 divided by 400 to get a percentage, multiply that by 20,000. You could take 20,000 divided by 400 to figure out the scale factor, multiply that by 7. You could cross multiply, taking 400 times x and setting that equal to 7 times 20,000 and solving for x there. No matter which way you did it, the answer turns out to be 350. A way you can check is if you take 7 divided by 400, you get the same decimal as if you take 350 divided by 20,000. And you do. That's why it's the right answer. This next problem, you can actually ignore everything in that paragraph except for the last sentence, which tells you plug in 73 for L. If we do so, if we substitute like that, it becomes a two-step equation. We simply subtract 24 from both sides. So we have 49 is equal to 3.5 m. And when we divide both sides by 3.5, 14 is equal to m, which gives us a. Number 4, you could consider as a ratio or proportion problem if you like, or you could simply say if there's $120 for a performance with eight people in attendance, that is $15 per person. So I take 15 and I multiply that by the new value of 20 people, and I get 300. Number 5, this 43% represents the costs. Then they want to know the profits. So from the earlier problem, we know that the performer earns $120 when 8 people attend, and here 8 people attend. So our total revenue is equal to 120. And this revenue is comprised of all the money coming in. But some of that has to go back to pay our costs. So in fact, if you remember back in algebra, revenue minus cost is where your profit comes from. So if I want to take 100% of my money and subtract the 43% in costs, that tells me that 57%, let's write that as 57, 57% of our money is our profit. So I can take our $120 and multiply it by 0.57 to get the answer. This is another problem where there are two solutions. If we simply take 4x plus 12 is equal to 8, and we solve this for x, it's a standard two-step equation. The only twist is a negative here. We end up with x equals -1. And a lot of people saw this and wanted to choose A and be done with the problem. But then they ask what number results when 2 times x is added to 7. We know what x is, so we can substitute in the -1. And this is a new problem. So -2 plus 7 is the same thing as 7 minus 2, which is just 5. For number 7, we could have solved this graphically or by factoring. So since this is a calculator-friendly portion of the test, if you put this equation here into y equals, and you press graph, you will see a parabola pop up that looks kind of like this. And it crosses the x-axis when x is 2 and when x is 4, which corresponds here with the 2 and the 4 in choice D. If you wanted to solve it by factoring, you would ask yourself what two numbers multiply to give us 8 and add together to give us -6. So if I tried a few numbers, 4 times 2 gives me 8, but 4 plus 2 does not give me -6. Those don't work. So what if instead I chose -4 and -2? -4 times -2 does give me +8, and -4 plus -2 does give me -6. Those are the numbers. So I can rewrite it like this, which will also give me choice D. So we're talking about distance traveled, and the only place where the distance flatlines is here, which must be when Marilyn took her lunch. And they want to know, when did she finish lunch? So that would be right around here, because she starts moving again. And if this is 1 o'clock and this is 2 o'clock, we're slightly more than halfway there, which is why 140 is the best answer. For number 2, the table above shows distribution of age and gender for a contest. They want to know either, which means you add the two probabilities together, female under 40 or male 40 or older. So that's 8 plus 2, all divided by the total of 25. Of course, it's impossible to be both, so either makes a lot of sense here, but that's how probabilities work with that language. You add them together to get 10 out of 25. General descriptions of this graph. It appears to be going down steadily, but the key word is here is decreased each year, and there are some specific years where it does not decrease, and you can quickly find a counterexample where it did not increase each year. And D, they did not really remain steady, because we're talking about hundreds of millions, and that leaves C. Things went up for about 3 years, and then they generally went down. Number 4, there's a couple different techniques here. One strategy would be to put these equations into y equals and press second graph to pull up your table and see which one is correct. My own approach would be to identify the slope. So I'm looking at the change in y, which is respective to rise. And this goes plus 3 every time. So my rise is 3. And then my change in x, or n in this case, which is just 1. So my slope should be 3 over 1. And that answer is C, because m is 3, or the coefficient of the variable is 3. For number 5, we need to plug in 7% for the juniors, so that's 562 times 0.07. And then we take 602 for the seniors, and we multiply this by 5%. We add these two together, and we get B, 69. Number 6, we are combining these two polynomials, adding them together. That's what sum means. So we take 3x squareds plus 5x squareds, and we get 8 of them. Remember that the term stays the same, so C and D are wrong because of this 4. It's only when you're multiplying that you increase the exponent like that. And the negative 5x minus the 2x gives us a negative 7x, so we see that B is also wrong. And finally, 2 minus 6 gives us a negative 4. So the equation can be set up like this. Our monthly fee is equal to 1.5 or $1.50 per movie plus a flat rate of $9.80. And they tell us that one particular month happens to be $12.80, so I can plug that in there. And if I subtract $9.80 from both sides, this leaves me with $3 that I spent in movies and $1.50 per each. There's going to be 2 of them. So I divide by 1.5 on both sides, and that gives me 2. This next problem, the goal is to type 225 words per minute, but that doesn't represent Donald's speed at all, so that's a distraction. Between 180 and 5, we are trying to increase, so D is wrong because it's subtracting. And then we determine which number should get the variable. You might think words per minute, but the 5 has words per minute each month. So 5 is the one that is changing. We look for keywords like per or each or every, and that's why 5 needs the M and not 180. So 3-pound pizza converted into ounces. You multiply by 16 to do so, and you get 48 ounces. We cut it in half, and each half weighs 24 ounces. We cut these halves into thirds, and we get 8 ounces per slice. So Nick's surveying a random sample, and you might think this 90 students surveyed is important. But based on this information, the only information that we're basing it on is the 25.6%. What would be true for the whole class? So we take this times 0.256, and this gives us our answer, which would be about 60. Remember, if we're multiplying for percents, we start with 25.6 and we move the decimal place over to the left twice. Density is equal to mass over volume, and they give us the mass and the density, so we can plug in 3 is equal to 24 divided by V. and a lot of people struggled with how to get v by itself. Since v is on the bottom of this fraction, we can actually multiply by the reciprocal, v over 24, if we wanted to. Usually we'll just do it one step at a time. So to get v out of that fraction, we need to multiply both sides by it. And this tells us that 3v is equal to 24. Then we divide 3, and we end up with v is equal to 8. A lot of people got 72. They screwed up, not realizing that v being on the bottom of the fraction means different rules apply. Number 6, if Raul worked 11 more than Angelica, well, you could level the playing field by saying 59 minus 11 is equal to 48, and then they work the same, so you divide by 2 and get right to 24. If that doesn't make sense to you, seeing how that works, you could have set up a system of equations wherein you recognize that r is equal to 11 plus a, Raul is equal to Angelica's hours plus 11, and if r plus a is 59, you can substitute for r this 11 plus a. Then when we combine like terms, we have 11 plus 2a is equal to 59. We subtract our 11. We get 2a is equal to 48. And when we divide by 2, we get the same answer, 24. As far as movies and ticket sales, they want to look at comedies, PG-13. So you follow along till those two meet, and we're at 4 out of a possible 50. So you might notice that 4 out of 50 is not here because there's a 9. So let's divide these both by 2 since they're both even numbers, and we get 2 out of 25, which is there. For number 8, you have to know two things: the special cases of slope. A is a vertical line, actually. B is a horizontal line. And C would look like this, and D would look like that. Then you have to know how the quadrants are numbered. They go in counterclockwise order, similar to the unit circle. And with no points in 1, it can't possibly be A or B. Those could only enter into 2 quadrants at a time. And C is always going to somehow get into quadrant 1. So here's an example of a line that has a negative slope and fits in 2, 3, 4, but not 1. That's why D is the best answer.